All I know is the truth's elusive, so much, in fact it's useless. If the thought's too surreal, even with proof they disapprove it. They paint you like you Judas, make what you say seem foolish. The truth becomes conspiracy, the media remains ruthless. Is anyone even hearing me? The air we breathe polluted.
How's everyone doing today? I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of Scratching the Surface. I'm your host, John Santiago, and I'm here to simply bring you the truth and facts about real issues going on in the world around us. Issues that somehow seem to dodge, if not almost every mainstream media station there is. These stations are the stations we've all either grown to love or hate, like CBS, ABC, CNN, Fox, NBC, MSNBC, etc. But what most people don't know is that only 6 corporations control almost everything Americans see, hear, and read. And the results of this.
In consumer news, economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take some of the spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take the spring out of the step of the Easter Bunny.
I mean, it's funny, but honestly, it makes me sick. And that's why I vow to be a source of information that isn't pre-filtered down into the same rhetoric that has become the norm of mostly every mainstream media station across the US. With inspirations keeping real journalism alive like Abby Martin and Jesse Ventura, it makes me realize the importance of alternative media, strictly because the priorities of the mainstream media seem to be entertainment-based, like so.
Seriously consider not continuing Congresswoman Harman, let me interrupt you. Congresswoman, let me interrupt you just for a moment. We've got some breaking news out of Miami. Stand by, if you will. Right now in Miami, Justin Bieber has been arrested on a number of charges. The judge is reading the charges, including resisting arrest and driving under the influence. He's appearing now before the judge for his bond hearing. Let's watch.
Unbelievable. Priorities, right? And moving on to another priority of the mainstream media, which I noticed myself and couldn't believe I was actually hearing at the time. But it seemed everywhere I looked, I saw some kind of Obama's weak caption attached to everything. Almost as if the media was trying to encourage a war with Russia. A few examples are Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters says, Putin has Obama's number, and his number is 0. We have Dick Cheney stating, no doubt Putin thinks Obama is weak. Look, Dick, what, are there not enough wars going on to meet Halliburton's needs right now? Or what? Yeah. And then there's Bill O'Reilly hammers Obama's weakness on Russian aggression. Quoted saying Obama will go down as a weak leader. When I noticed this, I thought back to after 9/11 how the media did the exact same thing. Not as far as calling Bush weak, because we all know that he went in guns blazing, but trying to spread the idea of war and selling it to the American people. Like we were fighting for freedom, when now we know we were fighting for resources. But all in all, who really wants a thermonuclear war to happen? And I fully agree with Abby Martin when she says that she opposes military aggression. And if you haven't seen Breaking the Set yet, you're missing the truth delivered fiercely. But don't take my word for it. Check it out for yourself.
In case you missed it, here's what happened in the last 72 hours. After witnessing the military buildup by Russian forces in Crimea, I decided to give a heartfelt statement on Monday about how strongly I oppose military aggression in another sovereign nation. Check it out. What I do know is that military intervention is never the answer, and I will not sit here and apologize or defend military aggression. This stance is completely in line with everything I've said on this show about U.S. military buildup around the world. And the second that I saw it happen in Ukraine, I felt morally obligated to speak out, even if it goes against the editorial line of my employer. I still have my job, and so far management has been supportive of my right to express my views on my show, which I will continue to do. And of course, the corporate media can't say the same about journalists who have defected from their network's point of view, such as Phil Donahue of MSNBC and Peter Arnett of NBC, who were both fired for speaking out against the Iraq War. See, when this story first started to get traction, the establishment press worldwide uplifted me as some brave journalist willing to stand up to the Russian Empire, which wasn't too surprising given the incessant Cold War fear-mongering by that very same press, almost goading the U.S. into a military response. But what happened next is nothing short of remarkable. See, after lauding me to fit the current narrative, establishment journos quickly caught on that my political beliefs are far too paradigm-crushing for them to continue to promote me. So instead, they smeared me and tried to minimize the content of my message with accusations that had nothing to do with it. Classy move, MSM. And unsurprisingly, the most vicious of these attacks came from people who have openly advocated for Chelsea Manning to be executed and publications that unapologetically sold lies during the run-up to the Iraq War. But CNN was actually surprisingly fair in their coverage, and I was happy to see journalists like Jake Tapper airing my statement in full. So I decided to go on the network and speak my mind, but instead of getting baited into trashing my colleagues and my work at RT, I tried to point out another side of the story.
Are you concerned about other parts of the programming on RT America? I mean, do you believe that although your show may have that kind of independence of voice, that a lot of the other programming doesn't and has drifted in the last week into blatant propaganda?
Piers, no different than every other corporate media station. I mean, we're talking about 6 corporations that control 90% of what Americans see, hear, and read. The lead up to the Iraq War, parroting exactly what the establishment said. I mean, you could reflect the exact same criticism on all the corporate media channels. So, you know, I can only speak for my show. I stay true to my moral compass, but RT toes a perspective of the Russian foreign policy, just as the entire corporate media apparatus toes the perspective of the U.S. establishment.
What is your specific criticism about the way RT America has covered this crisis?
You know, I just saw the way that the entire media apparatus was covering it. I mean, RT was covering it in a different way that I didn't agree with, and then I saw the corporate media coverage almost wanting to revive the Cold War. I mean, I felt like people were egging on Obama to attack militarily. I mean, it's insane living in a time where we have corporate media actually supporting military intervention and action against Russia. I mean, this is no joke here. We got to really take a step back and think about how we can do things peacefully and diplomatically and not continue to warmonger and fearmonger the American people about what's going on. It's been a wild ride, but at least Piers gave me a chance to give a perspective that's sorely needed in the mainstream. So thank you, everyone, for the outpouring of support for what I did and understanding why I did it. And all of this just reinforces the need to keep breaking the set.
And we thank you, Abby, for doing just that. So let's just go over some of our facts. We know these 6 corporations are behind almost everything we absorb. If you notice the 2 highlighted in orange, which are Comcast and Time Warner, if you haven't already heard, there's a controversial merger plot between the 2, which would put 2 of the largest companies in a monopoly-like state if they were to come together. The Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, or the HHI, is the way to measure the concentration of a given market. It's also used to see if the proposed merger would create monopoly-like conditions. If you remember the 2011 merger of AT&T and T-Mobile being blocked by the government, that's because it increased HHI scores by amounts that were off the charts. So going back to the Time Warner Comcast deal, it would put it at close levels at which it would be deemed highly concentrated and a worrisome consolidation. Basically, if big government evaluates the Comcast bid for Time Warner Comcast using the same standards it used on the AT&T T-Mobile deal, there should be no way this merger would be allowed to happen. And according to the routers, as far as March 19, 2014, the deal does face a state-level investigation. On to bigger and better things. There's always things like freedom of speech being taken away in places like, say, Turkey. In Turkey, they banned YouTube for leaking a Syria war conversation between officials. In the conversation, the intelligence chief said that he will send 4 men from Syria to attack Turkey to make up a cause of war. To those that don't know, that is what is known as a false flag event, when a country will go as far as to attack itself to justify going to war with whoever they please. A lot of people get demonized for even bringing up these false flag events when Turkey delivers one to us gift wrapped. Control the past and you control the present. It's scary to think if these past events were actually pre-planned.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall we had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. One can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition. It's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
All right, and for more on Comcast's proposed $45 billion merger with Time Warner Cable, we're joined by Brian Quinn, Associate Professor of Law from Boston College Law School. Brian, thanks for joining us tonight. Let's get straight into it.
Good evening, everyone.